Welcome to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Come on to the theatre.
Hello, and welcome back to episode 27, which, after a summer break and a busy period of auditions and blocking rehearsals, brings us to what could be viewed as Season 3 of the Manx Theatre Podcast with me, Neil Callin. Thank you to everyone who's listened to our previous episodes. If you're brand new to the podcast, welcome along and thanks for joining us. In this podcast, we like to try and keep you up to date with what's going on in theatre on the Isle of Man and chat to the cast and creatives of upcoming shows to find out a little bit more about the shows and the people behind them. And sadly, since our last episode, we've lost 3 big names within the Manx theatre community. Carol Clark came to the island in the 60s and worked backstage at the Gaiety and became involved with the service plays and ultimately Madfa through her love of the Easter Festival plays. In Ramsey, she was a member of the Raven Players and worked on many roles, but ultimately stage managed their pantos at Ramsey Grammar School and later the Gaiety. Later, when the National Youth Theatre was formed in Douglas, she set up the Northern Youth Theatre to give kids of the north of the island the same opportunity. Jean Webb was a life member and former chair of the Service Players. Jean performed and directed countless productions for the Service Players over many, many years, and at the time of her passing, she was the current president of the Service Players, attending rehearsals and performances when she could, and passing on any advice that she could offer. Finally, Jenny Green. Jenny was a life member of the Manx Operatic Society, the Albany Theatre Group and the Service Players, and she helped out backstage with wigs, hair, costumes and makeup on countless musicals, plays and pantomimes over many years for many different societies on the Isle of Man. I'm happy to say that an announcement was made to the crowd at the Gaiety Theatre before one of Centre Stage Productions' performances of Annie, and the audience were invited to give them a final round of applause. This was a very touching moment. Since recording this episode, we've sadly become aware of the passing of Kevin Farragher on Thursday, 11th of November, after a short illness. Kevin was a well-known face at the Gaiety, having worked at the Villa and the Gaiety for over 15 years and only just retired in July this year. Kevin was well known for his passion for theatre, and during that time, he's worked in many roles at both venues, most recently as assistant front-of-house manager at the Gaiety, and also for carrying out many of the Gaiety theatre tours. Keeping the love of the theatre in the family, Kevin was also the father of Gaiety's stage manager, Ted Farragher. Kevin was also a dedicated military veteran, having served in Northern Ireland and regularly officiated at the annual remembrance ceremonies. All will be sadly missed by many. On a brighter note, it's great to see that since our last episode, COVID restrictions in the UK have lifted further, meaning most, if not all, of the West End shows have reopened, including Back to the Future the musical, which, as a huge Back to the Future fan, I cannot wait to see. One theatre attempting to provide something a little different and allow some social distancing is London's Playhouse Theatre, which has been transformed into the Kit Kat Club, with tables and chairs for its production of Cabaret, starring Eddie Redmayne and Jessie Buckley, who was on the BBC talent show I'd Do Anything, which also helped launch the career of the island's very own Samantha Barks. Speaking of Samantha, Disney's Frozen has finally opened in the West End, starring Sam as Queen Elsa, and is receiving rave reviews. Sam has also recently released an album of songs from the musicals entitled Into the Unknown. Songs include the title track taken from Frozen 2, Heart of Stone from 6, Waving Through a Window and Only Us from Dear Evan Hansen, and I'd Rather Be Me from Mean Girls, and many others. The album is available to buy and or stream from all the usual outlets, and if you're in London, you might be lucky enough to pick up a signed copy from the theatre shop at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. It's also been a good time for musical adaptations, with film versions of Everybody's Talking About Jamie and Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights already available on Amazon Prime, and Dear Evan Hansen in cinemas. Tick Tick Boom, starring former Spider-Man Andrew Garfield and directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Steven Spielberg's West Side Story are due to hit cinemas in the coming weeks. There's also a number of other musicals currently in production or development, including an adaptation of Tim Minchin's musical of Roald Dahl's Matilda, which is due to hit Netflix December 2022. Also, I've just read that currently in development is a movie of the musical of Mean Girls. So this is a movie of a musical, which in turn is a stage version of the 2004 film.
Coming up on this week's podcast.
I'm joined by Alex Toohey to find out about his performing career so far and find out about his future plans as he makes the step from performer to producer. You can still listen to all of our previous episodes through the usual podcast outlets and at manxradio.com/podcasts. Whilst you're there, make sure to subscribe, give us a like, rate and leave a little review, and share with all your friends. If you subscribe, you'll make sure that you never miss another episode. This podcast is published for us by Manx Radio. And because of that, I've never really been sure of just how many of you wonderful people actually listen. We've got just over 400 followers on our Facebook page, which is fantastic, but I'd always assumed that only about half of those people actually probably listen. So when I was recently told by Manx Radio that our last episode for a chorus line back in July had received over 18,600 downloads, I was absolutely gobsmacked. So once again, thanks to everyone who's listened to our previous episodes. It really means a lot that so many of you are listening. Make sure that you keep up to date with what's going on between episodes by following Manx Theatre Podcast on both Facebook, Instagram and Manx Theatre Pod on Twitter.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre Podcast with Neil Callin.
Right, down to business. Joining me today on the podcast is South African-born actor and singer. We'll not mention his dancing just yet. He's a former chairman of the Douglas Choral Union, who over the last 15 years or so has managed to build up quite a list of impressive leading roles. It's taken a while to get him here, but Alex Toohey, welcome to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Happy to be here.
Alex, welcome along. It's nice to finally get you on board. I know there'd been talks quite a while ago, but you've finally done something worth talking to you about now, haven't you?
It's taken a little while, yes. It was a few years ago when the Manx Theatre Podcast first started, when I was approached, and I was just about to have my wisdom teeth out, and I said, can you just give me a few weeks? And several years later, here we are.
I think it was not long after Les Mis, wasn't it, that you did with the Manx Operatic Society?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, so it was during that time. I did the whole of Les Mis with really bad toothache, and I took several painkillers. I saved up my allowance of painkillers for the evening, for the day until the evening, and so pretty much the whole show, every show, I was had a lot of painkillers on board just to hide the pain from the teeth. Yeah, and then I had my wisdom teeth out, and it's fine. It's great now.
It's all good. Yeah. So over the years, then you've had quite an impressive list of lead roles, all the way from Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. You've done Jean Valjean. You've been John in Miss Saigon. You've been the President in Annie. Colonel Pickering in My Fair Lady. There's lots of big parts there.
I've been extremely fortunate, and I think. Yeah, just very, very lucky, very grateful, and to be able to play those roles. We're very lucky, as you know, in the Isle of Man to be afforded shows like Les Mis and Beauty and the Beast, which was a premiere at the time for the DCU, and Miss Saigon. As you say, we're very lucky to have those opportunities, and then to actually be cast in those shows. It's just mind blowing that you find yourself on stage singing iconic songs of world musical theatre, and it's hard to take in sometimes. But yeah, and then when I look back now that I'm further down my career, and you look back and you think, geez, I've got just everything to be proud of, really, and I am. Yeah,
you kind of pinch yourself sometimes, thinking, am I really here doing this role on the Gaiety stage?
Yeah, and none more so when you're singing "Bring Him Home," there by yourself, and when you're singing it, you part of you thinks, wow, I'm singing "Bring Him Home," in Les Mis, and then you think of all the people you've seen sing that song in London, and you just it just really is really, really humbling, and again, I'm very fortunate, and it's a great thing to look back on, in years and decades to come.
So, how did you first get started then? Was it back in the days of King Bill's and the house plays, or?
I'd always had an interest in performing. I think in primary school, I think my very first one was Aladdin. It was a tiny thing, but I thought, wow, this is quite good. Yeah. And then at King Bill's, I went there when I was 13, but I didn't do anything until I was 16 or 17. And I was very much encouraged by a lady, some listeners might know her, remember her, called Col McCarry. And every year they have a house drama festival there. And in my day, we were a boys' house, and some of the boys had to play women. And because I was one of the younger boys, they said, "Oi, Toohey, you're playing this woman's part." And I think, okay, fine. And Col McCarry, she would go around to all the houses anyway, and she would look and give the houses advice as to where they're going wrong, what they can do better, or what they're doing good. And she kind of pulled me to one side one day, and I'll never forget this. She said, said, you can act, and you can do something with this. And that kind of really spurred me on to do something ultimately in years to come, or try and do something in years to come. And so I just kept on doing it on a school level. And then once I left the high school, I didn't do anything then for, how old was I? I didn't do anything for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Until I came back to the Isle of Man from university, and I kind of fell into it. I was doing a karaoke for a good friend of mine at the Saddle. I think everybody knows Ray Sloan. And it was after one of the Douglas Corps Union's rehearsals for Barnum. I think that was 2001.
Something like that, yeah.
They came in after the rehearsal. They were rehearsing at St Matthew's, and they came to the Saddle for a few drinks afterwards. And I was hosting the karaoke for Ray because he was away. And I think they needed more men, and as...
Always need more men. Yeah. Always need more men.
And they asked me would I audition for their next show, because obviously this one was, Barnum was in full swing. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, they gave me details. And so come the auditions for Oliver, which was their 2002 show, I kind of had a look at what part I can go for. And I fell into... I went for Bill Sykes, and because I like to be as efficient as possible, so... I go through a script. Okay, Bill Sykes only comes on really in the second half, so there's only one half of performing to do. I don't really have to rely on anybody else. So if it all goes wrong, it's my fault. So the pressure's on me. So I'll go for that part.
Yeah.
And I was a big guy, and I thought, okay, I can be mean. And lo and behold, I got the part. And John Cumberledge was my, who's done many shows here, was the director for that. And so I've known John for nearly 20 years. And yeah, Bill Sykes. So I kind of hit the ground running with a big part. With children and a dog.
That's not bad for your first role, to step straight into the shoes of Bill Sykes.
Yeah, well, but like I say, with children involved, and handling a dog. But it was a great experience, and that kind of kick-started my love for the Gaiety Theatre. The first show I saw at the Gaiety Theatre was Godspell by the Manx Ops,
right? And
I was blown away. I was a child, and I was blown away by that, and that kind of really gave me that hunger to maybe, if I was lucky enough to be on that stage one day, and then I was, and so it brings you down to earth, and we're very lucky to have the Gaiety Theatre. We all know that.
Yeah. It's fantastic. So moving forward a couple of years then, you were also involved in Anthony Williams, his production of Copacabana that started here on the Isle of Man and then eventually ended up on tour around the UK.
Well, so that all happened kind of in my first year of performing, because I did Oliver for the DCU, and then that summer Dick Ray came to watch Oliver, and he asked me to audition for Fame, which was on at the Gaiety for that summer season. So I got a part in that, and ironically, an acting teacher. And then it was during that Anthony Williams, and I think he saw Oliver because he was rehearsing with the Ops at the time.
Yeah,
asked me to audition for Copacabana, which was previewing here, and he also he then did the Panto that year as well. So my first year, I'd done 4 shows. I've gone from nothing the year before to then 4. And on the back of the Copacabana that was here, and you were involved as well. We were very much kind of sidekicks in that production. We knew that there was a tour at stake. We knew that it was going on a #1 UK tour around places like the Bristol Hippodrome, Liverpool Empire. And I thought, this is amazing. And both of us, we're going to do what we can to get on this. And I was again a year of luck. Anthony offered me a part on the tour. And I was working in finance here on the island, and I just thought, well, you just got to take these opportunities. Exactly, yeah. And I did, and off I went. and joining a show on the tour with cast members who had been professionally trained, and been done quite a few shows, and there I was into my which was then my 5th show ever, all within a year. So it was a great experience, and one that I'm very grateful to have had, because in hindsight, I'm glad I've done it, but I'm the kind of person that needs to know where my next paycheck's coming from and how much it is.
The stability.
And, yes, exactly right. And so whilst it's a great idea at the time, you don't do anything during the day, and you're on stage every night, and that's fantastic. But once that job is finished, you need to find another job, and so it's a great life lesson for me.
Yeah.
Whereas I had that opportunity, it's fantastic. I know the experience, but what's more important to me is that stability in life, and that's why then, well, I stayed in London for a bit longer.
Yeah.
But then that's why I came back to the Isle of Man ultimately.
So on that tour, then you played the role of McManus, who was the policeman, but you and understudied Sam Silver, who was the club owner.
Yeah, I said this is where it gets all a bit weird again, because so I get offered this understudy, and the guy who played it is a guy called Craig Howard, and he in his theatrical credits had played Enjolras in the West End and in Les Mis, and I'm thinking, I'm covering this guy, and then what's going on with my life at the minute? This is crazy. Oh, we're doing this tour for, I don't know, 6 months or whatever it was, and however, and I'm not going to get on. But came the day I played 3 shows.
Yeah.
In Oxford as Sam Silver. Now, that's all great, but what happened was that day I decided to get myself a UK phone.
Yeah.
Because it was far too expensive using my Manx phone at the time, and I'd let the manager of Copacabana, the company manager, know when I started what my phone number was.
Yeah.
And then obviously I was going to then go back that night and say, this is my new number. And just so happened that on the day the guy fell ill and they're trying to get hold of me, my old phone was out of service. And so then I walk into the theatre at 6:00 for warm up, and they're saying, where have you been? We've been trying to get hold of you. You're on tonight, and we've not had any rehearsal.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any. I had to get into his costume. I had to quickly go through the lines, and luckily for me, I'd been paying attention in rehearsals to his, knowing that I was his understudy. And and then I played 3 shows in Oxford as Sam Silver on a Copa #1 tour. It was just all very, very strange.
With an hour and a half's notice.
With an hour and a half's notice, yeah. And look, back then my memory was a lot better, so I can remember lines.
Yeah, I can attest to that is true, especially with rehearsals we've had in recent weeks.
Yes, yeah. I struggle. I struggle nowadays.
So, when the Copa tour finished, then you went down to London. You were involved in a few shows down there. You were involved on Bombay Dreams, is that right? Yeah.
So in the evenings, while you audition and you look for an evening job, and I thought, well, I moved into a house. Anthony, when the tour finished, he found this house because we didn't know what to do, where to go, who to speak to, and he found a house with other performers in West London, and we moved into there. And one of the guys who we moved in with was one of the lead characters in Bombay Dreams, and he said there was a job going on the crew. So I went in there and I thought, great, I'll do that. I'll stay in the environment and then try and get the opportunities to audition during the day. And I ended up working in the crew for 9 months, and it was such a fantastic experience in the Apollo Victoria, which is where Wicked is now.
Yeah.
Huge theatre, like 2,000 seats. And yeah, I mean, I've still got lots of friends from that day. I see a lot of them in BBC dramas or adverts and other things. But yeah, I work backstage at Bombay Dreams, and there's I'm going to jump to a bit where it's a bit of a loose truth in that I can say, well, I have been on a West End stage. I performed in a musical in the West End.
Yeah.
Now in Bombay Dreams, I don't know if you've seen it. It's about essentially an Indian guy from the slums who makes it famous in Bollywood. And so there's a big film crew, and it's like a Western film crew. And they film it in the slums, this new movie in Bollywood starring this guy. So on the very last show, I thought, right, I'm having this. I'm going to jump onto this big massive sewer pipe, and I'm going to be out. So I was the camera operator. Yeah. So obviously me being very pale and ginger and all that, I'm going to be out of place. But it's okay because I'm part of the film crew, and they come from outside of India. Yeah. So doing that, and then it's just, again, that's another experience where you're on the stage on this huge theatre, these huge lights on you, and you just soak it all in as much as you can for those 30 seconds. But I'm opportunistic if nothing else.
Oh yeah, well, you got to take those opportunities when they come. Don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It may not have been the biggest part, but you were there. You were on that stage in the West End.
Exactly right.
In the show.
Yes, exactly right.
Going back to Les Mis, then, obviously you most recently played the part of Jean Valjean, but were you involved in the original I said the original, but the first on island performance of the Douglas Choral Union.
Yeah, so I was on the Douglas Choral Union committee at the time, and we secured this massive scoop, and it was just a huge thing for the island, and every man and woman and their dog wanted to be in the show. But yeah, I was involved. I was in the ensemble for that, and I was also understudy for Javert. I mean, Javert's a dream part of mine. And I went for it. I actually went for Javert when the Manx Ops did it as well. I'm thinking, right, this time I'm going to get that part. I'm going to get Javert. And then it kind of took a bit of a detour. A nice one, an unexpected one. But yeah, I was involved in that show, and then it was great. It was really groundbreaking, I think, for Manx theatre. There was a 3 or 4 or 5 year period, a couple either side of that, and then afterwards where, the level of, I mean, there's always been a decent level, but things just lifted. Whether that's from, MDs that were coming over, or directors, or the sets, but things just lifted on the island. And nowadays, it's just a normal thing for every production you go to be a high standard, and that's what the Manx public expect. Yeah, we're very lucky here with the depth of talent that we have. It's back in our day when we were. I mean, I didn't start performing until I was 22, 23. Yeah. Nowadays, if there's a child now that once they get to 23, they would have done 30 shows by then.
I mean, look at Corey that's doing Sweeney Todd with us. He'll be 15 by the time we do the show in March. Yeah. And he's already played Gavroche and a number of other little small parts. So he's already on about 4 or 5, and he's only 14.
And this is the opportunities that are now afforded to so much more, and not just more people, but also age ranges, and that comes from a lot of it's the places like Stage One. Yeah, and Move It and Platform and all the Christine Wilde Theatre School, all these places that are bringing these youngsters through, and at such a high quality as well. We're very lucky here.
So, what would you say then would probably be the dream role that you want to play? What's the top of your bucket list, or have you already done it?
But I wouldn't have said Jean Valjean before I played him, because I always thought that was a part that was out of my reach. Yeah, because I've come from a background where I'm more of a character actor, and I'm not your leading man kind of thing, and I'm certainly not a dancer. Neither are you. No, I'm only joking. You are, of course you are. But it's So in hindsight, now that I've played it, I sit back some days and I go, "Geez, did I really play that?" And I've got the photos, and I've got a few videos that people have taken. You watch the audience reaction, and every day, every performance, you just try and soak in what it feels like to play that part and what it feels like to sing those songs. So yeah, and until I'd been given that part, it was never something that really was on my radar. Yeah. But now that I've done it, it's how do you top that? Yeah. How do you just can't. And so and I must say as well, Jonathan Slight was. I hate the phrase understudy, because that makes out like he's not. It's rubbish.
Alternate cast, I think, is the more PC term these days.
But it's absolute rubbish, because like I just said, the talent here is so big, and Jonathan's fantastic. Anyone who saw him in Shrek as Donkey, and about to see him in Hunchback, the guy's just fantastic.
He's amazing.
And to be able to share that role, that's how I view it. We very much shared that role together, and with him, one of my closest friends, it was a real honour, and we've got a strong bond now. We did have beforehand, but even more so after playing that role. And we're both good friends with Dave as well, who's played it before. And yes, we actually, I don't know if you saw, we sang at Alexander Slater's concert. Yes. And all 3 of us sang Bring Him Home. And that was a very special moment as well, as essentially the 3 amateur Jean Valjeans, that the UK's seen. Yeah. That's it. Every other Valjean has been professional. Yeah. So we're very lucky to be in that group. Really. Brilliant.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
For many years now then, you've been involved on stage and backstage to a certain extent, and also on committee with the Douglas Choral Union as both chairman and committee member, helping to organise and arrange and put on the show. But now you're stepping out on your own.
Yeah. Well, yes. I don't know if it's going to be a permanent thing, but it's certainly something that's going to be for the next 18 months in the planning. So one of the shows I've done in the past, and I've got to say, it's of all the shows I've done, it might not be the most obvious favourite role, but this is my by far favourite show to be in, and the role was Jerry in The Full Monty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was just such a funny show, and obviously the 6 guys got naked at the end. So, and I can't describe to you the feeling of standing on that stage, totally naked, feeling the breeze.
Yeah.
And
the breeze from the back door, yeah.
Yes, exactly right, yeah. And in just your shoes, and the lights behind you basically light up the whole theatre.
Yeah.
And your mind is saying, they can't see us, but because you see every face in the audience, so much so that so much of the theatre lit up by those lights. You're thinking they must be able to see everything. There must be.
Yeah.
But we got so confident in the lights that by the end of the week we were just wiggling our hips and all that kind of stuff. But so going back to the question was I've got a real urge to do that again.
Yeah.
Because it was such a great show. And the audience loved it. The houses that came to watch it, it's the closest thing I can imagine to being in One Direction. Such was the reaction. And I think by playing Jean Valjean, I'm looking. It's made me realize that there's certain things I want to relive again, if possible. Yeah. And so I'm putting on I've set up a production company called Two Feathers Productions, and I will be staging The Full Monty with all the original cast, or the original cast that wanted to do it again. Yeah. So in July 2023. I would have done it sooner, but it's the first 2 weeks I could get post-COVID and the rearrangement that the theatre had to do. But can't wait. And by far the show that I've had the most fun in and the most enjoyable, and it's my favourite show. And I really hope the audiences come and see it again. Yes.
No, I believe during the last run of it, there was a slight delay one night on the big final lighting cue that might have revealed slightly more than you'd intended.
Well, well, on the last show, I think the lighting cue, the lighting cue kind of, we all expected to count to 5 and then bang, there you go. But they took a little bit longer to make the lights go brighter. Yeah. And I thought, in my head, I'm like, I ain't moving till I see the theatre go right here. I am not moving. But a few of the guys started to reveal everything, and then quickly hid everything once they realised the lights weren't up fully. But and I don't know if I should say this, because we might see ticket sales fly out the door for this area first, but the lighting effect at the end doesn't work in the gods. And we found that out kind of halfway through. Once more people came in, they went upstairs to sit.
They don't get the same blinding effect.
They don't get the same blinding effect. I mean, but thankfully it's a bit further away. There's not much to see. But the light, it doesn't work as well up there.
I'm going to be selling binoculars up in the gods.
They need to be very powerful.
So the company then, Two Feathers, where does the name come from?
It comes from so my mother passed on in 2017, and in South Africa, which is where we're from, she was very much involved in public relations for a major hotel group down there, and then she ultimately left the hotel group and decided to set up a restaurant with a chef friend of hers from the hotel, and they called it the Two Feathers.
Right.
And so I just thought it was very, it just very poignant, and the colour scheme for the logo is very much the colour. It incorporates colours from the restaurant, but also her favourite colours, and purple and pink. So it's very much, I really wanted to feel. I'm going to give, we're going to give the Full Monty a lot of hard work, and But this, by giving it this little tilt, just gives it that little bit of heartfelt interaction from me. Yeah,
it's a wonderful sentiment there to name after your mum's cafe. That's wonderful. Okay, let's have a look at some of the standard questions that we asked each time round. And one of the ones I like to ask is about what's the best and worst costume that you've ever had to wear. Sometimes, now, and we've had this fairly recently, certainly with some of the guys, especially on Shrek and in a few other shows where they've been one and the same. They've been the best costume ever, but at the same time they have been the worst because they've been so hot and sweaty and horrible. But what's your best and worst costumes?
Well, am I allowed two?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, my initial thought was going to be the Full Monty.
Yeah.
That final scene.
Yeah.
It's the worst costume because it's your own.
Yeah.
But it's also the best costume because of how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
You know, when you're doing the show. So it's not a costume as such. You know, it's essentially socks and boots.
It's that birthday suit.
Exactly right. And that was, you know, that was the worst in the run up to it. But by the end of the week, it was the best.
Yeah.
But in terms of actual garments and that, I played when I was, how old was I now? I was 32 when I played Colonel Pickering in My Fair Lady for the DCU, and that part, as by the name Colonel, you know, he's got very fine, you know, regimental garb and
ex-military,
exactly, very smart,
well turned out,
and I don't often get to wear that kind of clothing, and so I think that show, I think the clothing I wore in that and it was fantastic as well because I was very unrecognisable in that show. A friend of mine, Nick Kane, his parents came to watch the show and they knew I was involved in the show.
Yeah. And
at half time, you know, his dad says to his mum, "I thought Alex Toohey was in the show." So and to me that's a real testament to either the wig and the makeup and the costume, or my acting. I'll go for the acting.
Yeah. Or maybe a combination of both.
But yes,
your acting has taken your character so far away from you that it doesn't look like you. Well, that's good. It's great. I mean, obviously Brian needs to have his eyes tested, but
yes, I think so. Yeah, don't sit in the gods.
Yeah. The next one is one of my other favourites, and sometimes people struggle with this one a little bit, and more so the men than the women. And this is our gender swap question.
All right.
So, which role would you most like to play of the opposite gender?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think in more recent years I've played straighter parts, and like I say, in the earlier years I was more of a character. Yeah. And I really miss those because if you're either the baddie or you're the funny guy, you know, it's much more interesting in rehearsals, and it's a better show for a performer. So I'd really like to go back to something like that. And now I thought about this in terms of, well, you know, what parts would scream out, and I thought, well, what about Madame Thénardier? I thought, no, I think what would really, really be fantastic, and it's the opposite gender, but it's played by a man, right? And that's Mrs. Trunchbull. Oh yes, in Matilda. Fantastic. I would love to play that part, and I know I'd have to, you know, fight David Artis for that. A fight I'm willing to have if that ever came up. But Mrs. Trunchbull. So it's not strictly the opposite gender. Yeah. But it is. But it kind of is, yeah. I mean, you've got the height on your side. That's something that I don't have. So it's something that I've come to appreciate in recent years. Well, as we found out recently, you've got wider shoulders. So, your next performance then is as the evil Judge Turpin in the Manx Operatics production of Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, which is coming up in March next year. Yeah. The first show on March the 5th, my mum's birthday. Yes. So she'll... Oh, well, if you know anything about Sweeney Todd and the part of the judge, she will be spinning in her grave. She will not... but she was always very proud of everything I did, and so it was very, very nice. But, yes, this... Yeah, a part that I didn't know too much about, to be honest with you, beforehand. Yeah. And I tried to, before the auditions, do a bit of research. And so, like everyone does, I went to the movie with Johnny Depp and Alan Rickman. Yeah. And I watched that and thought, okay, well, it's good enough for Alan Rickman, you know. Yeah. Of course it's good enough for me then. But I thought, okay, and you get a measure of the parts. I thought this would be great because it's a part that you can go back to being evil again. But what I didn't know was, and what's not in the movie, is are certain scenes where he really is quite vile.
Yeah.
And I thought, geez, no wonder nobody auditioned for this part. And so it's a great part to get your teeth into, and a great part to, I was speaking to John Cumbledge, who's directing this, I mentioned, who directed my first show. We set a few scenes a couple of weeks ago, and he came up to me and said, you've really got to lose. We're all, as a human race and as human beings, are quite, moralistic and decent people. You have really got to lose every ounce of decency within your body that comes naturally to you to play this part, because he is just vile.
Yeah.
And anyone that watches it will see, hopefully they'll detest me, because then that's job well done.
Yeah.
Because the things he has to do and say, and how he has to say them, is not pleasant.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people leave that theatre hating both you and me, I think we've done a good job, haven't we?
Job done. Happy days.
Yeah.
They might probably feel sorry for you. You're an evil guy, but also you got a good heart. With the love of your family and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But you're devoted to the judge. Yeah. But at the same time, the judge doesn't care about anybody else apart from himself and his own gratification.
I mean, I was involved in the production last time round, which was, by the time I get to do the show, it was 18 years ago, and I played young Tobias, and now I'm the old Beadle. But it's so refreshing to see how it's been through the last two blocking sessions with John, that it's so fresh and it's new and it's so different. I guess to come back and direct a show that you've directed before, it's probably really easy to just re-churn out a new version of the last time round that you did it. But I think that the cast that we've got this time is very different. A lot of the characters that are coming out in a different way, and I think the judge and the Beadle, they're much different than they were last time round. And David Artis, his Sweeney Todd is very different to the way that Tony Hawk's did it, and they've all got their own merits in their own way, but it's nice to see that it's something new and it's something fresh, and it's a different staging as well. So even if the audience did see it 18 years ago, I think coming along in March, they're going to see something very different to what they saw last time. Yeah,
100%. And I think that there's a human side to. I didn't see it the last time. I think that's one of the periods when I was away with Copacabana.
Yeah, it was 2004.
Yeah, and so so I can't really compare it to that, but the way I'm feeling about it now is that there is a human side to all the characters, and something that a lot of people can relate to. You can't relate to someone who's going to cut someone's throat all the time, but there's parts of his character that are quite funny, and that are quite human. All he wants is his wife and his daughter back, and but then ultimately this whole story is about revenge. Yeah, his revenge on the judge, and everything else kind of fits around that, but I found there's a big human side to a lot of characters. Yeah, apart from the judge. Yeah, yes, and it's really hard. It's really hard to play a part that is so evil, because you've got to kind of switch your brain off to being. And everyone knows I'm a joker and and that kind of thing. And it's it's a hard thing to do. So but look, I'm looking forward to it, and. If anyone can do it, I can. I hope.
Nothing like a bit of self-confidence. That's what
you've got to. But this is it. I've got to tell myself that, because, firstly, it's the faith that John and the society put into me. Yeah. So they think I can do it, despite what I think. Because honestly, when I found out what this character had to do and say, I struggled with, I don't know if I can do this. I just, I don't know if I can bring myself to do this.
And mea culpa is quite a strong number as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a lot going on there on many levels.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about it now, so that's why I'm just pausing a bit. But I've got to tell myself that I can do it, because if I don't, I will kind of back out of the part again, and giving the part the kind of attention and effort it deserves. Yeah, really. Okay, right. Well then. Moving on then, one of the last questions I always like to ask people is our Spotify playlist. So this was set up just after we came out of the first lockdown back in 2020, so just about a year and a half ago now. And the idea was that we would create a playlist that would be the best or our favourite
musical tunes. So Neil King and I, when we first set up, we each put 10 songs in of our own, and these were songs that either we've performed in a show, or they're from our favourite shows, or they are songs that mean something to us. And then each guest that we've had on to the podcast since then has added a new song to the playlist.
Right.
So in amongst that list, we've got Perry O'Day. He chose Being Alive from Company. Joe Hillard chose Me and the Sky from Come From Away. Tony Eccles chose When I Grew Up from Matilda.
Great.
Dandy Dancox chose What Baking Can Do from The Waitress. And Charlie Williams chose From Now On from The Greatest Showman. I mean, we're looking at a playlist there that's 41 songs deep now. So, Alex, which song would you like to add to the playlist, and why?
Yeah, it's hard to pick a song that's not already there as well.
Yeah.
But then again, so I thought, well, shall I add a song that from a show that I've done that means something to me, or means a song that means something to me, my wife and I kind of quickly put that one aside. No, I'm only joking. She's great. So the obvious thought into my mind was Bouidoy from Miss Saigon.
Yeah.
Which is not the song I'm going to add.
Okay.
But that was my first thought. And I've been lucky enough to not just perform it in the musical, but at many concerts since, and it's great to have the opportunity to do those again. But I decided to go for a song that really had a profound impact on me when I saw it in a musical.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only song in any show that I've ever seen that has stopped me in my tracks and reduced me to tears. And it's from Everybody's Talking About Jamie, and He's My Boy.
Oh, what an amazing song!
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit kind of just welling up about it now, because I remember, it was, I went to see it with my wife and her sister Susie, in the West End, and this was about 15 months after my mum had died. And you get on with life as much as you can, and I had an idea of what the show was about, but I didn't know kind of how the story developed. And this song was, you can't help but listen to the words. And when I was listening to the song from the perspective of my mum singing those words, and she always used to call me my boy, and so it really just, it's like hitting a brick wall, and I just couldn't stop crying. And so it's quite embarrassing when you're in a theatre full of people and you're thinking, I've got to play it cool here. I've got to just there's something in my eye. But it was just uncontrollable. And so it's such a great show. Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, you really should
I have.
Try and get to see it.
It's an amazing. I mean, I've seen it at the live screenings a couple of times. I've not been fortunate enough to get to London to see it. Emma did. She was down for a training course, and then she texted me saying, "Guess where I am? I'm going to see Everyone Talks About Jamie." It's like,
it's incredible.
Yeah.
And I know there's a movie out about it now on Amazon Prime, and I've seen that, and it's great. But the musical is better, and if you're going to have a first experience of the story, see the musical on the stage. But yeah, it's such a fantastic song, and I defy anyone not to be emotional when they listen to that song. And especially if you're a parent as well, I'd imagine, as you are, and have a little boy,
who's white blonde as well.
Exactly. So you're going to, you'd understand those feelings as well. Yeah. So it means different things to the different people. But yeah, it was an easy choice to choose that song from that show.
Brilliant. Right. Well, Alex, thank you very much for coming and chatting with us today on the podcast. We wish you all the very best with the judge in Sweeney Todd, and no doubt when we get back around and a bit closer to Full Monty, you'll come back and we'll
happily. Yeah, I'll bring the director with me. The director David Artis. Yeah, he doesn't know what he's let himself in for again. Thank you, Neil.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. Cheers.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre Podcast with Neil Callin.
This time of year it gets quite busy with festive events, so here's a brief rundown of what to expect over the next couple of months. First up is Parkinson with a production of Shirley Valentine at the Gaiety Theatre starring Lisa Kreisky in the title role. That runs from November the 25th, 27th. Hopefully we're going to try and catch a quick chat with Lisa to talk about that. Next up is the Service Players, who are putting on a double header of festive comedies written by local playwrights. They're having a mini tour in December, and they are 2 one-act plays that are being played on the same night, and the plays are The Nativity Play, which is written by Daphne Kane, and The Christmas Quiz, which is written by Lisa Creighton. There are 3 performances where you can catch them, and they are the 2nd of December at the Erin Arts Centre, the 5th of December at Macclesfield Village Hall, and the 9th of December at Port St Mary Town Hall. Details on how you can buy tickets can be found on our Facebook page and on the Facebook page of the Service Players. Peel Pantaloons are putting on Robinson Crusoe at the Peel Centenary Centre from the 4th to 11th of December. Now this always sells very quickly, so don't delay and get your tickets quick before they're all gone. Manannan's Winterfest then is on at the Gaiety Theatre on the 10th of December. The Sound of Christmas, featuring the children from the island's primary schools, is on at the Vilmarina's Royal Hall on the 13th of December. Then Shown Productions are providing the Gaiety's annual Christmas Panto again this year, which runs from the 18th to the 31st of December, and has local performer and friend of the podcast, Jack Divers, in the lead role. Hello Little People are back again this Christmas, following the success of last year's Dewin and the Beanstalk, with another panto with a Manx slant. This year they present Cinderfella, yes sir? And as usual, all parts will be played by just Chloe and Michelle. This runs at Kensington Arts, which is the new name for the Youth Arts Centre on Kensington Road, from the 21st to the 28th of December. Taking a brief look forward to next year, then, we have Viva Las Vegas at the Vilmarina on February the 5th, which will no doubt feature many familiar faces from the Manx stage. This show will be raising funds in aid of the Mayor's charities, which are Gry, Rebecca House and the Manx Youth Band. The Douglas Choral Union then will be bringing another first to the island stages with a production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This runs at the Gaiety from the 11th to the 19th of February, and I'm sure we'll catch up with the cast for a chat about that in January. Then finally, running from the 5th to the 12th of March, the Manx Operatic Society are staging Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street at the Gaiety Theatre. This is something we just talked about briefly before with Alex. This production sees David Artis in the lead role and John Cumbledge return to the island to direct after several years away. Tickets should be on sale for this by the end of the month. So as you can see then, we've got an action-packed few months ahead of us. So with that, we bring episode 27 to a close. Thanks once again to Alex for joining me on the podcast, and we wish him all the very best for Sweeney Todd and Two Feathers Productions. As I said earlier, I'm sure we'll hear from him and some of the cast again closer to the full Monty hitting the Gaiety stage. Remember to like and follow our social media pages and to get notifications of upcoming episodes and events. Don't forget to check out our Spotify playlists by searching for Manx Theatre Podcast under playlists. If you have any events that you'd like us to talk about or promote on a future episode, you can contact us through our social media accounts or by email to manxtheatrepodcast@gmail.com. All that remains is for me to say thanks for listening, and I hope you join me again next time on the Manx Theatre Podcast. I've been Neil Callin. Goodbye.
The Manx Theatre Podcast, taking a look behind the scenes of Manx Theatre.
And happier than actors alive for me.